If you've scrolled through your feed lately, you may have noticed a new hashtag emerge and sort of take over everything: Euro Summer. If you ask me, Euro Summer can be a state of mind. It can be a style trend, and it could also be an actual way to spend part of your precious summer months. So, if you are planning a trip to Europe for this summer or maybe next year, or you're just interested in learning more about the logistics of planning a big trip and how it comes together in general, then this episode is for you. I put together my best Euro summer travel tips since we just got back from Italy last week, including things like what I packed, what I should have packed, what I definitely did not need to pack. Are you sensing a theme here with how hard it is to pack for 10 days, whether you're going to Europe or wherever it is? And we'll also discuss how to plan what to do, navigating languages, landmarks, and those windy city streets. So I hope you're all excited to chat about this more. Before we get into all the tips, let's do a little create and consume. And if you're a newer listener, this is the name of the show you're listening to, and also a mini segment I do at the start of each episode to share what I am creating and consuming each week, because I always seem to be doing both. So you also need to let me know what you are creating and consuming. You can leave a comment over on Instagram. You can come leave a comment on the blog on createandconsumepodcast.com. You can leave a comment if you're listening on Spotify. That's a feature that has been added lately. And let me know, because I'm nosy and I want to know what we are making and watching and consuming. As far as what I am creating this week, it has been kind of a slower process than expected to edit the Italy vlog for the trip, but I'm excited that I am in the home stretch of that. I believe it should be live by the time this episode airs, so I can link it in the show notes or just link to my YouTube channel, and it should be the most recent video if you're listening to this episode live in real time in late June 2025. And this is the first trip that I took my Sony camera on. If you follow my YouTube channel, you know that I got a new camera back in October, so this was my first time bringing this camera on a trip, bringing it overseas, and I am really happy with how all of the footage turned out, and I'm so excited to share this. As far as what I'm consuming this week, I actually just saw something right before I sat down to record that I really wanted to spotlight. So, two creators who I follow, Crystal Bick and Courtney Halverson, her handle is Pretty Little Fawn, actually teamed up for a sponsored post with T3 Micro. If you don't know T3 Micro, they create hair tools, and this post in particular, I believe, was to spotlight their curling iron. And if you work in influencer marketing, or if you're a content creator yourself, you should absolutely go watch this ad, because this feels like such a great example of creative storytelling for many reasons. They have split screen, they have different camera angles, they obviously are also doing it together, which I would love to see more brands take advantage of creator friend duos and do sponsored content with two creators at the same time, because you can reach both audiences, which is obviously amazing. And the other great thing about this post was when it came to the center of my feed, like when I encountered it, I didn't immediately think like an ad and swipe away. I watched it because it looked already like what Crystal and Courtney's content typically looks like. It fit in very well to the world that they've already created visually, the text on screen, the cues, the fact that they're together, like it really all just felt so organic. And when I realized it was an ad, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. So if you need some inspiration, if you've been feeling stuck at all as a content creator, or if you just want to watch what I think is a really cool video in addition to the fact that it's an ad, go check out this reel that they posted. I will link it in the show notes. I thought for this week's episode, I was going to be able to tell you that I'm consuming the new season of Love Island USA, but I actually haven't started yet because the new season premiered basically right as we were leaving for Italy. And I didn't want to watch the first two episodes before we left because I didn't want to like recognize names, so that as I'm scrolling through threads and seeing people's commentary and stuff, that I would be like, oh yeah, this girl, like, wait, what happened to this? Why is she with this person now? So I actually haven't started yet. I've muted as many words as possible as I could on threads to avoid spoilers, and I think I'm spoiler free so far, but I really need to jump in because I think they're up to episode like 18 or something, and that means I have a lot to catch up on, even if I watch it at 1.25 speed, which I do with some of the episodes. Not the first one. For the first one, I am locked in, I am there, I am present, you have my full attention. But, you know, it is a lot of episodes per season, and if the goal is to catch up, I'm going to need to move quickly here. So hopefully I'll have more to share on that in the next week or two. But if you're watching Love Island, stay tuned for my thoughts. And that's Create and Consume for this week. Now, if you want to hear more of the Italy trip recap that focuses less on logistics and more like the little details about our trip, names of restaurants and things like that that we went to, be sure to go listen to last week's episode. I will also link that in the show notes for you. That is essentially like if I could copy and paste a FaceTime catch up with a friend to be like, oh, how was your Italy trip? And then go on an hour-long rant uninterrupted. That is essentially what that episode is. So today we're going to focus more on getting organized. I think this is important to do ahead of time as much as possible so that you can maximize the time spent if you are going to Europe, because it's not cheap to visit there this time of year. And I fully acknowledge that. And sometimes getting around can also be a process made more stressful if you don't plan ahead before you go. So, what I've done here is broken this episode down into a few different sections, from planning to navigating around to packing, and I also threw in some kind of miscellaneous bonus tips at the end. So, I think I've covered all my bases here, but let's dive in and first talk about planning your trip. Now, if you are in the brainstorming phase, still figuring out maybe exactly where you want to go, or maybe you know the country you're planning to visit, but you're planning to figure out the specific regions and how you're going to break down your time in that country, honestly, I think the best place to start when you're brainstorming is to either watch travel vlogs or read travel blogs. Oh my God, that could have been a disaster, but I think I enunciated my V's and B's properly. To really figure out which areas and which attractions are going to be most important or something that you would want to prioritize on your trip while you're there. And this was something we kind of had to think a lot about in regards to Italy. If you listened to last week's episode, you already know, but the reason for our Italy trip was because one of my best friends, Nora, was getting married, and she was getting married in the Umbria region of Italy. So the fact that we already knew for sure we were going there did kind of help influence and shape where we took the rest of the trip, which ended up being through central Tuscany, including Florence, Siena, and some of the medieval hilltop towns in the area. That just ended up making the most logistical sense for us. But in the beginning of the trip, we were like, well, we also have both been to Italy before. Should we try to drive like an hour and a half north to San Marino to get a new country checked off, which, if you don't know, is like a little tiny dot of a country within Italy. Italy actually, I guess, has two of those because Vatican City is also considered its own country. And we were at first trying to figure out, like, does that make sense? And then if we keep driving north, can we hit like Ravenna and then ultimately get to like Lake Como and Milan? Then we kind of realized, oh, I guess it probably would make sense to go more west into Tuscany. And then I was like, should we also try to fly to like Croatia? Should we try to go to Greece? And that was definitely going to be way too much for the amount of time that we were able to take off to be there. I was not complaining, by the way, about spending a week in Tuscany. It was more so just like doing the initial brainstorm to say, like, oh, could we pop over here? Could we go there? Like, we could have maybe gone to Switzerland, but my friend Nora is actually from Switzerland. So I would much rather go there when I have the chance to visit her and have her, be my local tour guide and show me around places. Because the beauty of Europe, obviously, is the countries are all so close together. And that's actually what we did last year when we flew to Amsterdam. It's actually just about a year ago now that we flew to Amsterdam for the Eras tour. And then we also took the train to Brussels and just spent one day in Belgium. But watching a lot of travel vlogs and videos definitely helped us kind of narrow down where exactly we wanted to go within Italy, and really helped us map out what ultimately became our kind of road trip itinerary. And I have a full blog post as well on Keep Calm and Chiffon with all of the names of the hotels that we stayed and exactly where we went when. So I can also link that in the show notes if you'd like to read up on that or even recreate our road trip, and let me know if you do. So once you have your regions down, booking hotels is obviously the next way to do it. And I like using hotels.com ideally to do this because I can get points accumulated on there and can sometimes get discounted rates, but maybe there are smaller, more boutique hotels that are not on websites like that. I feel like hotels.com is more common probably within the US, but it's worth looking at a site like that or any other booking platform that you like to use. Maybe it's something like Expedia or a related website where you can see all of the options available to you, if you can get like free cancellation. And sometimes with hotels.com, depending on how many nights you're able to stay, you can also like earn a free night. So things like that are helpful to keep in mind, especially if you're planning to go for quite an extended amount of time, which I guess I would say more than a week. is what I would consider like an extended amount of time. And we were in Italy for 10 days. Once you have your hotels booked and you know where you're going to be on what day, then I would look into booking either attractions, day trips, or any activities that you want to do when you are in Europe. I would definitely look into booking tickets ahead of time, especially for major tourist attractions. I am actually really glad that someone said to me at Nora's wedding that they had booked their tickets in advance to see Michelangelo's David at the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence, which is where the sculpture is located. Someone said that to me on Sunday, so I was able to then book us tickets for the Saturday later in the week where we were going to be in Florence. And this ended up being such a godsend for two reasons. Number one, it guaranteed that we got in and got to go see the David and obviously everything else that is on display at the Galleria dell'Accademia. But also the ticket that I booked in advance, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but I definitely paid a little bit more than the average entry price. But what that got me was the ability to skip the line. And that was obviously great because we had our time booked and we even got to go in a little early. We showed up like I think 15 minutes before our time slot was actually there, and they were like, "Oh, you could go straight in if you want. You don't have to wait for like if it was for 2:30, we were there at 2:15 and we were able to go straight in." But also the lines to get in that we would have needed to stand in were in the beating sun, and the last leg of our trip in Florence, if you listen to the recap episode, you know already, but it was 97 degrees the 2 days that we were there. It was so hot. And the thought of standing in that line for even like 2 minutes just caused my insides to melt. So I'm really grateful that I bought this ticket in advance and that we were able to skip the line. So especially during the summer months, there's going to be a lot of heat tips throughout this episode and dealing with the temperatures in especially like southern Europe. And I definitely wanted to make sure I called that out because some things made the trip a lot more tolerable. Now, beyond museums, when you're looking at more so activities or day tours or group classes and things like that, I highly recommend the website Viator. We used Viator for this trip and we also used it during our honeymoon. And the main thing that I've used it to book has been like food related excursions. So in the case of our Italy trip, we used it to book a day trip to the Chianti region, which included 3 wine tastings and visits to some beautiful historic towns that, quite frankly, were like so off the map and like down dirt roads that I don't think we ever would have found on our own. And then also a cooking class in Siena with a local instructor. So both of these were 10 out of 10 experiences. I really enjoyed both. You obviously have like a local guide or a local teacher who knows these things inside and out. For the wine tasting, it was a little bit on the pricier side, but we also had our tour guide drive us around all day, like drive us from Siena to the Chianti region and then back. So that saved us the trouble of either having to drive ourselves or hire like a driver for the day if we would have wanted to do those tastings on our own. And it also included lunch, and not just any lunch, like the most beautiful lunch I've ever had in my entire life, I think. It was on a beautiful little terrace overlooking just the rolling hills of Tuscany. I share footage of it in my vlog. Oh my God, I actually could cry thinking about how pretty it was there. And then the cooking class was amazing as well. We learned how to make 3 different pastas and also tiramisu. We obviously got to eat all the food after. We were also supplied with plenty of wine for that class, which was really fun. And we were also emailed the recipes later on. So in theory, I could cook them here at home if I want to, which I do want to. It's more about just finding the time and the right occasion and all of those things. Another thing that we didn't use Viator for, but that you could absolutely book through there is guided walking tours. And that is something that I think is really helpful if you have zero context about the place where you're going. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I actually was an art history major in college. So I was pretty familiar with a lot of the Renaissance works that we were seeing. I mean, in the time that I have graduated college, which I guess was just about 9 years ago, if I'm adding up the math correctly, and I think I am, and that's a little terrifying. I've forgotten some of the details there, but like I know which enunciation is like the best enunciation, if you know what I mean. But that's another option as well. Also on Viator, most of them have like pretty good cancellation policies. So say you wanted to do like the Chianti wine tour and you saw that it was going to be pouring rain for the day that you were going, I'm pretty sure most of them have like 24-hour in advance cancellation policies and things like that. But I will link Viator down below. Literally just go there, type in the city that you're visiting, and see what they come up with, because there's so many options. To go back to booking hotels for just a minute, one issue that I sometimes run into, or one thing that I think about when I'm planning trips, is the location of my hotels and whether or not it makes sense to stay more centrally and pay more, or whether it makes sense to stay a bit more like on the outskirts and pay less but have to kind of commute to some of the main attractions or the center of where you're staying. And I think it totally depends on personal preference. But one thing that I do want to add is that the Uber slash taxi situation in Europe is different, obviously, than what we have here. I'll talk about that a little more in the getting around slash navigation section, but I do think that walkability is one of the best parts of a lot of these European cities, and that usually choosing to stay a bit more central to the main action and the main attractions is going to end up being more cost effective and probably better for like the time that you're there, versus if you try to stay a little bit further out and then need to end up like hiring taxis or, spend even more time walking when you could have just been a little bit closer. So that's just one gal's opinion, but something that I have noticed time and time again when we've chosen to stay centrally. It just means that we get to see more stuff and do more stuff and walk to more stuff. And that is usually my preferred way to spend my time on a trip. Also, when you're planning your trip, to think about the dates and the time of year that you're visiting. Obviously, we're talking about Euro summer here, but a couple of things to keep in mind might be to check in on any local holidays, festivals, things that are going on. And I'll give you a great specific example from Italy. So in Siena, they have a horse race twice a year, and both of the dates actually are in the summer. I think one is July like 2nd and the other might be August 16th or something like that. Don't quote me. I can link to an article about this horse race in the show notes. But they have this big horse race each year that is like a citywide event, and they fully take over Piazza del Campo, which is like the center of Siena, and honestly where we spent a good amount of time. That's where the Torre di Mangia is. That's where a lot of restaurants are. That's a lot of like central meeting points for tour groups and things like that. So if you were traveling to Siena and you didn't know this horse race was going on, it would definitely alter your experience, maybe in a good way. Maybe you want to see a horse race, but it's just something to keep in mind. Like if you wanted to climb the clock tower in Siena, I'm pretty sure it would be closed on the day of the horse race, because it's a whole thing. All the neighborhoods have like different rivalries and things like that. So definitely look up things like that, because you could be walking into like a fun local tradition and end up having a blast. But if it means that you don't get to do like something that you were really hoping to do where you were visiting, it's definitely good to know. Also, look ahead for the dates that you're planning on visiting to see what the typical weather is when you're going to be there. So we got a little unlucky, I guess, in Florence, because the weather was actually well above what the average typically is for early June, which I guess says more about global warming and the state of our planet than anything else. But it just so happened to be that we had some outlier days, but in general, July and August are going to be pretty hot in countries like Italy, Spain, Greece. But when we were in Amsterdam last year for 4th of July, it was pretty moderate and mild. Like I definitely was glad that I brought a denim jacket. I ended up wearing that out most nights when we were there. And so countries more so like the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, those are all places where I think you will experience much more mild temperatures. So if you want to avoid the heat entirely, maybe check out more northern European countries. But if you do want to travel to, the Italies and the Greeces and the Spains of Europe, you could also try to book in like a shoulder season. So you could go a little earlier in the season in early May, or you could wait till maybe like mid to late September to go as well. Depends on where your boundary of summer starts and ends. Like in my head, yes, there is Memorial Day and then there is Labor Day, but you could also go by the solstices. I mean, we just had our summer solstice. I think it was June 20th. You could also go all the way through to September 21st. That's like the fall equinox. So depends on what your version of summer is. For me, summer was always just like whenever school got out, and then it ended whenever school started again. But honestly, I bet it would be beautiful in late September. And that's when we got married. So maybe an anniversary trip to Europe will be in our future some years from now. Okay, the planning section was pretty heavy, but I stand by that because, again, like the more you can plan ahead of time, I feel like the easier it makes your trip when you're actually there so you can enjoy and live in the moment. But let's move on and talk about what to pack. And by the way, I completely meant to film a packing video for my Italy trip, but I failed on that. We are doing another trip with Andrew's side of the family next month, though. So I think I'm going to try to film a packing video for that trip for my YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe over there if you are not already subscribed, if you want to see a real world packing video for a vacation. Okay, number one at the top of the list, thing that you have to bring to Europe is comfortable, stylish walking sneakers. And I hesitate to even say shoes. Like, yes, maybe there are flats that are comfortable. Yes, maybe there are some slides and things like that. Now, look me in the eye if you're watching on YouTube. Hello, we're making very intense eye contact right now, me and you, if you're watching. You are really not going to want to wear anything other than sneakers, especially if your European vacation involves walking. And spoiler alert, most all of them probably will. I will give you 3 small exceptions where I was not wearing my sneakers that I packed for this trip. And all of these were for just limited time periods. So, number one was for Nora's wedding. I brought a pair of block heels that I was requested to wear with my bridesmaid's dress. Done. I'm obviously not arguing with the bride on her wedding day. Those were the shoes that I wore, and I actually lasted in them pretty much all night. So I was impressed with that. And that was on grass on the castle grounds. Okay, so keep that in mind. The second exception was I did wear a pair of flip-flops by the pool at the castle. Again, we're on grass. We're in our own little area where we also happen to be staying. That's where I brought my flip-flops. And then the third exception was we did do a photo shoot in Florence, and I did pack a different pair of heels for that to go with my dress, which I didn't even wear to walk to the photo shoot. I changed into my flip-flops again, walked there in those, and then was in those shoes for maybe like 45 minutes maximum, walking around the cobblestones. The entire rest of the time, I was in my pair of sneakers. Now, I am obsessed with the shoes that I packed for this trip. They are a pair of Allbirds. This is my first pair of Allbirds that I've tried, and they are a low canvas white sneaker. And honestly, the one reason that I really, really love them is obviously because they're comfortable, but they also look good with dresses. This has been a very niche fashion problem that I have been trying to solve for years, which is like what sneakers look good with dresses and don't necessarily make all of them look like they are clashy or mismatched or too sporty or kind of like a streetwear look that I can't necessarily pull off. So to me, these sneakers paired perfectly with the dresses. They were very comfortable walking 10,000 steps or more a day. Highly recommend them. If you are someone who's like, I need cute shoes to wear in Europe, might I suggest flats? Ballet flats are having a moment, and even better if they have some kind of strap or like slight support, if they're not just like a typical ballet flat. I have a pair from Dolce Vita I can link in the show notes that do have a little strap over the middle of your foot that I do think helps a lot. But to be totally honest right now, the problem with those is that they are going to get sweaty. They're going to get a little sweaty, so that's just something to keep in mind. And then if you really want to wear a pair of shoes just to like go out to dinner, if it's a short walk from your hotel or something, low block heels or espadrilles are probably going to be your move. There is just no real place for heels, stilettos of any kind in all these cities with their cobblestones, and that's just the truth. So heed my warning, pack accordingly. Hopefully that's helpful. Now, when it came to what I packed in terms of clothing, breezy, versatile, lightweight, all good words to keep in mind. And that could mean anything from like a pair of linen pants to a cute matching set to a sundress. Honestly, just something that you can wear all day. Ideally, something that doesn't wrinkle too much. I mean, linen is what it is, but we love linen, obviously, anyway. This was kind of hard because, in theory, I did pack some dresses that in my head I was like, I could wear this more than once. But the problem was just if I had spent all day in it and I was already sweaty and then didn't feel like putting on that same dress again the next day and styling it slightly differently. So that was the one real issue I ran into. If we had scheduled a time to do do laundry somewhere on this trip, I think I could have packed less and then reworn some of my dresses and again styled them differently, maybe put a t-shirt over them or tuck a t-shirt under them, do a little bit of creative layering there. But there is actually a girl who I follow, I think on TikTok. I have no idea what her name is actually, but I definitely followed her as soon as I started watching these videos where she'll do like pack with me for Europe with one dress. And usually she's not actually going anywhere, but she's just using that as a way to style like one dress 5 ways. So that's another example of how Euro summer is infiltrating the feeds right now. And again, she half the time isn't even going anywhere because people will comment and be like, oh yeah, one dress, but then 6 pairs of shoes. Like, that's not insane. And she's like, it's just for fun. We're just styling things for fun. Everybody calm down. I will link one of her videos in the show notes so you can check it out. And honestly, I might even want to recreate her video and like give her credit for the inspiration because I love that idea. And not even that it's like fully her own original idea. She's definitely not the first person to do that, but I love the way she's doing it with different destinations in mind. So like for that specific idea, I would definitely credit her if I made a similar video. You know what I mean? Okay, something I didn't pack that I was literally told to pack by my friends and then I just completely forgot, didn't mean to ignore them, it just slipped my tiny brain, was a portable handheld fan or like a neck fan. That would have been a game changer in Florence for sure. And I will say a lot of the local shops there did sell them for like, €7 or €10, something like that. I actually do have one that I got from the YouTube shopping event that I went to that it's from a brand I'm pretty sure called Fangirl. It actually clips onto your phone and it's a fan and also a selfie ring light. So like you could take beauty videos of your makeup where your hair is blowing in the wind a little. I mean, it's a tiny fan. It's not going to move your hair that much, but absolutely love that concept and 100% should have brought that with me. But alas, I did not. But I own it at least. So if I'm going somewhere hot again, I should definitely take the advice and pack that. Okay, sunscreen, sunscreen, sunscreen. And if you don't want to pack sunscreen and also bug spray, I'll just jump ahead to the next bullet point as well. You could also totally buy these at a local pharmacia or, pharmacy wherever you are. I'm talking about Italy because I have Italy on the brain. But yeah, the sun is strong in the Mediterranean/Southern Europe area. So definitely bring sunscreen and also bug spray. I was not prepared for all of the bugs, especially when we were staying in the more rural area in Umbria where Nora's wedding was. And I literally had to edit some bug bites out of the beautiful photos that we took in Florence. So let that be your warning. Again, bug spray, or they also, I'm pretty sure, make those insect repellent wipes too. So that might even be a more travel friendly thing that you could pack. Another thing is a refillable water bottle, depending on where you are. But also, if you are running to a local pharmacy or grocery store or something, I would just suggest stocking up on a bunch of water bottles. And in Europe, they tend to sell natural or fizz water. So in Italy, it was like Naturale or Frizzante. So we honestly just got a giant 6-pack of like the big water bottles to keep in our room. And that was really helpful that we, would refill our refillable water bottles with, or just drink them when we got back to our room to kind of rehydrate. But a refillable water bottle is great to travel with, especially when you're on the plane too. This is probably an obvious one, but like a plug adapter or voltage converter. I have heard girls say, don't bring your Dyson Airwrap to Europe. I don't own a Dyson Airwrap, so I can't speak to this, but this is your warning. I've heard of them shorting out even with the converters because it's not about the plug. It more has to do with the voltage. I didn't even want a chance bringing my like $20 Conair curling iron, having that short out on me. So what I actually did was, 10 years ago, when I was last in Florence, I just bought a European curling iron. I was able to go to a beauty store. I don't think it was that expensive. I think it was maybe like €30 or something. And it's kind of falling apart now. I mean, it's been 10 years, but it did last me all throughout this trip. So I was able to curl my hair with the European curling iron, no problem. Another thing I wish I had packed, and I meant to, I just literally couldn't find it, was basically like a light shawl. That would have been great for Nora's wedding because it did get chilly towards the end of the night. But I think I just stole Andrew's jacket at one point, if I'm remembering correctly. But then also, it's great in countries like Italy where there are a lot of religious sites like churches and cathedrals and stuff, because typically they want you to have your shoulders covered, which is not realistic if it is super hot that day and you want to wear something sleeveless or strapless, but it's a nice thing to be able to like crunch into a ball in your bag and then pull out where you actually are visiting these, more holy sites and whatnot. So definitely a light shawl. And I wanted to buy one while we were there, but truthfully, we were supposed to spend some time the last day in Florence shopping, and it was just so hot that we couldn't stand to even be like popping in and out of the air conditioning. It was like just not in the cards, unfortunately. So I am still in need of a shawl, but I will get one at some point. And also for what to pack, a change of clothes in whatever you're bringing as your carry-on bag. We made sure to pack our clothes for the wedding in my carry-on suitcase going to Italy because God forbid our checked bags got lost, then we would at least have what we needed for the wedding. Also, I recommend, just like extra change of clothes in there anyway. And our bags did not make it on our flight coming home. So that is actually something that I am really glad I did on the way there. And then luckily on the way home, it didn't matter that our bags didn't make it. But case in point, summer travel is really busy. All of the airports are probably overwhelmed with more people passing through than they typically are. So keep in mind that you could potentially lose a bag at some point. And here's another tip while we're on the topic: just get an AirTag for your bag. AirTags have given me so much peace of mind. I think it's like $75 for a 4-pack, and then you can buy replacement little batteries to go in them whenever the batteries die. I think mine typically lasts like a little more than a year. But that's just one added step for peace of mind. Or, well, it maybe can't say that I had peace of mind when we landed in Newark and I opened my app and I was like, oh, yes, there's my bag in Germany. But, at least I knew where it was. All right, let's review some logistics for getting around and navigating and all of those things, because sometimes that's the thing that can end up being such a big time suck. If you've ever watched a single season of The Amazing Race, you know that for sure. And yet, even with all of the technology available to us, you know, people can still get lost. People, meaning me and you and anyone, could still get lost. So a couple of things that will help make your life easier if you're planning your Euro summer trip. Before you head out for your trip, check to see if you need to get an international driver's permit or an international driver's license for the country you're visiting. For Italy, I believe it was required to rent the car and drive the car. So Andrew got his, which meant that like I couldn't drive the car. Oh no, poor passenger princess, poor me. Yeah, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't get behind the wheel today. No, I'll just be over here drinking my third glass of Chianti. Thank you very much. Worked out super well for me, but I'm pretty sure that this permit was easily attained through AAA. I think it was only like $20. So definitely just make sure that you look into this if that is something that you plan to do on your trip. Another thing that Andrew did before our trip, which was super helpful considering he was driving, was he looked up all of the different street signs in Italy and looked to see what they mean, which was hugely helpful because there are some signs that look like one thing but mean another. And if you're not familiar, you just want to make sure you understand what you're looking at. So this is something he took the time to research beforehand. Thank goodness he did. Definitely saved us a couple of times out on the road. Also worth noting, a lot of these small towns, including like the medieval hilltop towns, but even when we were in Florence, will have ZTLs, or in Italy it was like Zona de Limita Traffica, Traffica Limita. Zona Traffica Limita, I'm pretty sure was what it was, which is basically restricted driving zones where they limit traffic because there are usually a lot of pedestrians, or maybe even just because the streets are kind of old and it can't handle that many cars passing through it at a certain time. I know when we stayed overnight in Montalcino, we had to get some kind of temporary parking permit as we drove through a zone of limited traffic. And then when we dropped off our rental car in Florence, we entered a zone of limited traffic, and I believe it took a photo of the license plate, but the rental car company had explained that like we would need to go through there and that they would pay whatever the toll or the fee was to be in that limited traffic zone. So definitely just something to keep in mind. We did see someone get pulled over and fined driving through San Gimignano where they were not supposed to be. So they take it seriously there, and I assume in other countries as well, especially in these older, more historic cities. Another thing Andrew did, I just want to say something. For a lot of trips that we've been on, I have participated more in the planning, but I kind of let Andrew take the lead on this trip, and it's almost like that joke where it's like, oh, when I'm with my husband and my brain is off, and I needed a trip like that. I needed a trip where my brain was off. But something else Andrew did that I thought was very smart when he told me about it, like it would have never occurred to me, was that he downloaded the Google Translate app. Now, you did need to be connected to Wi Fi to use this app, but when you were, you could type in things in any language the same way that you could do if you go to translate.google.com just on your desktop. But the other cool feature about it was that it had a camera translate feature. So if there was wall text at a museum that was in Italian, or if there was a menu that we couldn't read, he would be able to take a photo of it and it would translate to English, which was actually so cool. We honestly didn't really utilize public transit much on this trip. We did quite a bit of walking, and obviously we had our car too. But if we hadn't had the car, I suspect we would have looked more into public transit options, probably mostly in Florence and Siena, the other mountain towns we visited. That probably wasn't really an option there. But last year when we were in Amsterdam, we did use the tram system quite a lot, and it was super easy to navigate. It was really affordable. So I would definitely look into figuring out what your transit options are for local trains. And then even within Europe and some of the different countries, in Italy, there's Train Italia, there's Eurostar in like the UK, Paris and Brussels. Definitely worth looking into for getting from place to place. And for some of the more local subway systems, you could probably even buy like a multi-day pass or like a week-long pass that might be more cost effective for where you're staying and how long you're staying. Earlier in this episode, I mentioned Uber and how it's different, or at least different in Italy for what I'm aware of. And I did find a blog post that broke this down really well. I'll try to link it in the show notes if I can find it again. But to summarize for you here, essentially what this blog post explained to me was that there is Uber in a city like Florence, but it's almost more like booking a private car than it is calling a taxi. And the price will also reflect that, because in Italy, it's actually a very prestigious and like serious process to become a taxi driver. You actually have to like go through quite a bit of training and like get certain certifications and things like that, versus here pretty much anyone can kind of sign up to be like an Uber or Lyft driver. Not to take away from anyone who does Uber or Lyft in the States, but it's just worth noting that in Italy, being a taxi driver is kind of something that you like work towards. Like it's more of a sustainable, livable career there. So for that reason, we were more interested in trying to take taxis the two times that we needed them in Florence. The first time was after we dropped off our rental car. We actually walked to the train station to get a taxi from the rental car garage drop off. And then when we checked out of our hotel in Florence on the last morning, we asked if they could call a taxi for us. And we asked how long it usually takes. And they were like, oh, they should be here in like 1 to 5 minutes from the time that we call. So taxis are pretty available and accessible in a city like Florence, which I think is great. If you like need to be guaranteed to get somewhere, or you're not really somewhere where you can call a taxi or ask like a hotel concierge to call one for you, then maybe Uber is a good backup to have. But I would basically try to use the taxis where possible in Italy, because again, they really like train to do it and are very good at it for good reason. And here are a few extra miscellaneous tips that I wanted to make sure to share. And I might try to go through these rapid fire, because I think we brought the heat back with us from Florence, you guys. We're going through kind of a bad heat wave here in the New York City area right now. It's definitely going to hit 100 today, might even also be 100 again tomorrow. So wish me luck. And I've been recording this episode without air conditioning because I am here to deliver you the most superior audio quality at all times. So here I am, just starting to get a little bit glistening, but we're going to power through the end of the episode. So in terms of withdrawing cash, like this used to be a big deal. I remember back in the 2010s, I guess. Does that make me sound so ancient to refer to the last decade as the 2010s? I don't know. But I remember when I had traveled to Europe in the past, it used to be a big thing, like make sure you have euros, make sure you have euros. And I want to say, for the most part, we got around with card just fine. We did end up withdrawing a little bit of cash, and we were able to look up a bank over there that's like a partner or a related bank to the bank that we use here in the States, so that we didn't have any fees for withdrawing money from that bank's ATM. So that was super helpful. But honestly, what we ended up using cash for most was paying for gas. For some reason, we were having a little trouble with like the card readers at gas stations. So the fact that we were able to say like, okay, just give me then 20 euros worth of gas and kind of move along was super helpful. And also to tip like the woman who did our tour in the Chianti region. So those were the main times that cash really came in handy. There was one shop where I almost bought a shawl, you guys. I did see a shawl I liked in Siena. I forgot all about this until right now. where I wanted to buy it. It was like 15 euro. I was ready to go. And she was like, oh, sorry, cash only. And I was like, oh no, I'm sorry. I don't have any euros with me. So I had to leave it behind. So yeah, I would say maybe if anything, withdrawing like 100 euros of cash, depending on the day and stuff. But otherwise, we were really okay with just card. Also, you could download the Google Maps app offline, or there's also a map app called City Mapper that helps you navigate without data. So you can like pin, your hotel or a museum you're going to, and at least have those locations on there to help you navigate and get around if you don't want to be using up data. Speaking of data, so I have Verizon and I do what they call Travel Pass, which is basically like for $12 a day, I get unlimited data up to a certain point, and then it switches me from like the 5G, I think, to just the regular LTE network. So I am basically able to use my phone as I normally would. You could also look into an eSIM or like a European SIM card if your phone supports it. The data for that will probably end up being cheaper than some of the roaming plans like the Verizon and other US phone companies offer. So did just want to mention that. It makes me remember though, like I had friends who went abroad in like 2014, 2015, and I'm pretty sure they had to buy these like tiny little international phones that essentially looked like burner phones, and they would like email their parents and stuff. And oh my gosh, that was just a simpler time. Andrew and I did actually go to dinner one night in Florence, and we sat next to a table of what I assume was a group of students who are maybe doing just like a month in Florence for the summer, because there's no way that spring semester study abroad people would still be there in June. I don't think. I feel like they usually leave in like April or early May. But it was just crazy because they were all just sitting at the table, like texting each other, like with their iPhones and everything. And I was like, these kids will never know like the study abroad struggle, or having their little burner phones walking around Europe and not having access to Instagram and TikTok and all the things. And oh my God, does this make me sound ancient? You can tell me the truth, honestly. Another tip is to visit museums if it's really hot, to take advantage of the air conditioning. Those were the places that I knew I could count on it. I will say the Uffizi Gallery, it was on, but it could have been a little stronger. Galleria dell'Accademia, I could have sat in there all day. That was the nicest, coldest spot that we probably went to. And we also ended up going to the Salvatore Ferragamo Museum, which I don't know if I would have gone and sought it out had it not been so hot. And I was looking for like one more air conditioned place where we could go for like 40 minutes to an hour. And that ended up being one of the great surprises and one of my favorite things that we did in Florence. So worth looking into. Plus, it doesn't hurt to be exposed to more culture and to support all of these museums, especially all the ones that have these fabulous Renaissance artworks that were created mere blocks from where they're displayed now, which is obviously so cool. Also, just be mindful of cultural norms wherever you're traveling. I know that I look and sound like an American tourist where I'm going, so I try to keep that in mind, be respectful and make sure that I'm just aware of how everything is where I'm going, and that I'm leaning into that to embrace my experience of being abroad in that country. So, for example, dining hours in Italy, a lot of the restaurants close between 2:30 and like 7 p.m. So that's something to keep in mind. Make sure that you take advantage of the times that restaurants are open to eat when you need to eat. If you're looking for lunch at 3 p.m. somewhere, especially in more of a small town, it might be a little trickier to find. There could be some spots, but don't expect every restaurant to be open all day. Also, in Italy and lots of other European countries, they tend to eat later. So 7 p.m. is like the earliest that most restaurants open. A lot of times it was us and some other tourists who were the first ones there at 7. Most other people probably not rolling in until like 8, 8:30 or 9. Also, tipping isn't really as expected. If you do experience like amazing service, you can tip, but it's not really the custom, at least in Italy, to do so. Do a little research for wherever you're headed to see what the deal is. And again, also keep in mind, like I mentioned before, the dress code can vary at certain religious sites and places of, worship, or places that are super meaningful to the country that you're visiting. So that's another reason to pack a shawl, for example, if you're going to Italy, if you want to pop into some of the cathedrals and be respectful. Keep some room in your suitcase for souvenirs if you're a shopper. I meant to do so much more shopping than we actually did. Honestly, the heat kind of took the fun out of it towards the end of the trip, and I was hoping to do more of the shopping in Florence. Florence, but one thing I did buy in Florence was a little Christmas ornament that's actually a fleur de lis in red and gold. So it's, kind of a nod to the Medici family and that iconography that can be spotted basically all throughout the city of Florence is a little fleur de lis icon. And it is so cute. It was from a shop, I believe it was called Studioteca. It was right south of the Arno River, close to the Ponte Vecchio. And I could have spent all day in this shop if it were not, if I did not have Andrew with me. I probably could have spent like 2 full hours in there just looking through everything, trying on some of the clothes. It was so beautiful. And I told the shop owner I thought her shop was so cute. And she told me that they actually had 2 locations and the other location had different stuff too. So if I can find them on Instagram or their shop somewhere, I will definitely link them in the show notes. Oh my God, just so cute and happy to support a local business, of course. Now, I know I've already talked your ear off about planning in this episode, but here's another tip for you. Leave some room for spontaneity. Honestly, I think I mentioned this in the last episode too, but we really didn't make like a single restaurant reservation. For me, walking around these cities, the best spots are the ones that you stumble into and stumble upon. The entire 10 days that we were there, we only got turned away from one restaurant where we didn't have a reservation. So I take that statistic as a sign that most places are pretty open to walk-ins, which is great. Obviously, if there's somewhere you especially want to go, it'll be worth making a reservation to make sure you actually get to eat there. But some of the best meals that we had and some of the best days and the way the day ended up going were because we just got to eat spontaneously at fun places. And if you're in a pinch and you need to find something quickly, just pulling up Google Maps and searching like lunch, drinks, brunch, sandwich, things like that can be a big time saver and help you find something that looks good that is hopefully in the vicinity of where you already are. That's actually how we found this place called Pino's, which was a sandwich shop we went to our last day. It was the simplest sandwich. It was literally just ham, brie, and truffle oil. I'm still thinking about it. I'm wondering if there's a way for me to recreate it. And I just feel like it's not going to be as good, but it was so good. And we wouldn't have found that little sandwich shop if we hadn't just taken out our phone and gone beep, boop into our Google Maps and stumbled across good old Pino's. And Pino himself was there. Was that my celebrity sighting for this Italy trip? I think so. Also, watch out for pickpockets in crowded areas. This is especially true in Italy, mostly Rome, and then also Florence, Siena, kind of these big city centers, especially with these big open piazzas and plazas where you might be gazing up at the landmarks and not totally paying attention. I would definitely recommend bringing a zip top bag or a bag that closes at the top, keeping your possessions close to you and making sure that you don't end up in a situation where you're like, hey, where is my wallet anyway? Because that would not be good. Also, it might be worth starring where the US embassy is or where the embassy for your country is in whatever city you're visiting. That is something that I remember my parents had me do when I went to, I guess, when I went to visit my friends studying abroad in Florence all those years ago. Just so that if for some reason you do like lose your passport or something along those lines, you know exactly where you need to go to get that resolved. And then my last tip is a very fun one, which is book a photo shoot while you're on the trip. If that's something that means a lot to you, if you find like sometimes it's hard to get good photos when you're traveling or you don't want to bother the person you're with. And thank you again, Andrew, for all your content help on this trip. It was definitely more than I usually ask for, but I think the content did turn out great. One easy way to solve that is to book a photo shoot. Like I knew for me, I really wanted some beautiful, high quality photos in front of the Duomo. That's a really hard thing to do, especially at such a busy landmark like that. So we booked a photo shoot with a local photographer. We found her through a website called Local Lens. You can look up photographers in any city. You could also obviously go on Instagram and search Florence photographer, Barcelona photographer, wherever it is that you're going. I've also heard from my friend Alyssa that you can do this through Airbnb experiences, so that might be something to check out as well. But I'm so happy with the photos that we have from this trip, and I know it's something we'll always be able to look back on. Plus, it saved the stress of having to be like, Andrew, no, this way here. Okay, now make sure that there's no one behind me when there's like 50 people behind me because we're at the Duomo and it's one of the busiest possible places we could be. And, it just saves like the little dance and the stress of doing that and hands it to someone who has Photoshop and can remove all those people behind you and do it very quickly and easily. Oh my gosh, I must turn the air conditioning back on or I fear I will just melt into a puddle here on my floor. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope this was a fun, chatty one just to give you some tips and inspiration. Like I said, if you are actually planning a trip or if you're just planning a trip in your head, hello, I do that literally every single day. And I really appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, rate the podcast 5 stars if you're listening on Spotify and Apple, all the things. It really does help get the show out to more people, especially since I'm a newish podcast girly, just 1 year and a couple weeks and counting. So we're in our infancy, but I'm super excited to be back with another episode. I'll see you guys again next week, and thanks so much for listening.